In the Realms of Mediumship by Chico Francisco Candido Xavier and inspired by the Spirit Andre Luis. Chapter 29. Annotations about the Work. On the way back to Aulus's home, it occurred to me to ask his opinion with respect to various problems that always seem to surround those who dedicate themselves to the study of mediumistic matters. While with the assistant, we had briefly but surely touched on gripping material that had provided us with an excellent course of study. Amid both incarnates and discarnates, we had closely examined the assimilation of mental currents, psychophony, possession, the out-of-body experience, clairvoyance, clairaudience, healing forces, telepathy, psychometry, and materialization, in addition to a few of the crucially important themes of mediumship, such as the power of prayer, mental fixation, immersion of the subconscious, lycanthropy, obsession, fascination, the law of cause and effect, the out-of-body experience on the deathbed, and corrupted energies, all without having to resort to terminological complexities. In spite of our respect for human science, we wondered why it used such confusing terminology for occurrences common to everybody, when simplification would be much more interesting. For example, metaphysics called cryptic hidden sensitivity cryptesthesia and labeled the knowledge of facts without the aid of the physical senses as metagnomia. They divided mediums, sujets in the vocabulary of some investigators, into two categories, those with unusual psychological faculties and those with mechanical, physical, chemical faculties, and so on and so forth. Why not simplify such difficulties of expression? After all, I thought, in essence, mediumship involves the interest of all humankind. I was mulling over such thoughts when Aulus, obviously making note of my criticisms, considered. Mediumship undoubtedly is everyone's common heritage. However, each individual and each group make one note of it in their own way. On our part, we can treat mediumship with evangelical simplicity, based on the clear teachings of the Master, who was in constant contact with powers invisible to the common person as he healed the obsessed and the sick, conversed with the great teachers who materialized on Mount Tabor, listened to heavenly messengers in Gethsemane, and then returned in person to communicate with his disciples after his death on the cross. Earthly science, for now, cannot analyze it without the rigors of experimentation. After a brief pause, he continued, "It doesn't matter if aspects of the truth receive different names according to the inclination of the researchers. What does matter is the sincerity with which we devote ourselves to the good. The industrious effort of science is as sacred as the heroism of faith. Science, with its scales and test tubes, also exists to serve the Lord. By investigating and categorizing mediumistic phenomena, it will finally register psychic vibrations, thus ensuring the dignity of religion in the New Age." I didn't want to place the discussion in scientific realms, however. Our learning experience was drawing to a close. This was the last night we would be enjoying the wise company of our instructor, and I wanted to hear what he had to say about mediumship per se. For this reason, I directed our conversation, which resulted in the following dialogue. It is understandable that science does not examine the mediumistic field from our perspective. Logic and positive experimentation travel roads quite different from those of intuition. However, even in the currents of spiritualism themselves, we see mediumship suffering the most diverse interpretations. What are you trying to say, Andre? I'm referring to those brothers and sisters who accuse mediums of insanity and madness, recommending the segregating of the students of truth in temples of initiation, at a good distance from the legions of earth's sufferers and unlearned. Ah, yes, the sanctuary of religious initiation, whatever it may be, is valuable to us as an advanced outpost for the distribution of spiritual light. However, those who forget the law of cooperation in such sanctuaries isolate themselves in the ivory tower of their own pride, focusing on brilliant yet barren discussions. Such individuals are like travelers huddled together on a dangerous island of repose, while the brave sailors of the good sweat and suffer to discover secure routes to the continent of fraternity and peace. The former rest in the shade of trees, comforted by abundant game and fresh water, as they study the grandeur of the sky or philosophize without benefit. But the day always comes when the furious tide overruns their makeshift home, pulling them out to sea for the resumption of their necessary experiences. Many scholars from our sphere of endeavor assert that only contact with higher order spirits should be cultivated, relegating ordinary mediumistic manifestations to the cesspool of obsession and infirmity, which, in their opinion, should be left alone without any attention on our part. That is complacency in the guise of wisdom. We cannot deny the fact that obsession is a mental disease, but could medicine heal someone by neglecting to fulfill its duties? True, high-order spirits from our plane never forsake the suffering and the small, just as the sun shines on the palace as well as the cave with the same silent devotion. They help everybody in the name of providence. There are many spiritualists who do not tolerate any rudimentary manifestations in the area of mediumship. If the medium doesn't correspond to their demands, if he or she displays limited understanding or competence, they walk away, exasperated, labeling valuable expressions of phenomenology as fraudulent or deceitful. Alice smiled and replied, "They are probably champions of least effort. They ignore the fact that the scholar was illiterate at the beginning of his or her life, and they probably condemn the child that still cannot read. These individuals, Andre, have forgotten the help they received in grade school, asking for easy ways, like the addict that demands drugs. They accustom themselves to deplorable attitudes towards life. They demand everything for themselves, but disregard the obligation to assist those who are still behind. There are those who say that Spiritism proceeds wrongly in helping the unbalanced and the ill, because in doing so, it gives the impression of a doctrine which, by force of mingling with the insane to give them assistance, converts its centers of prayer into vast asylums for the mentally alienated. That is plain foolishness on the part of those who avoid serving their neighbor. Medicine suffers no impairment by offering help to the sick. Honored by the hospitals where it is practiced, it becomes more praiseworthy the more it expands its assistance to the infirm. Spiritism cannot be held responsible for the mentally imbalanced who seek its help any more than doctors can be blamed for the sickness that requires their intervention. As a matter of fact, Spiritism benefits tormented mediumship and the sick mind because it provides them with the balm and enlightenment necessary for their readjustment. It is very easy to contrive theories that exonerate us from our duty to serve others, but it is very hard to apply the lofty principles we espouse by employing our minds and our own hands. If the world's and our own recovery were limited to pretty words, Christ, our daily standard, would not have had to come to the needy. It would have been enough for him to have sent angelic proclamations to humankind without having to experience its ignorance and problems firsthand. Fortunately, however, conscientious and sensible spiritualists are learning that our aim is to revive the gospel on its pure and simple foundation, and that the Lord has not given us the treasure of faith only so that we can believe and speak, but also be ready to spread the good, beginning with ourselves. There are also those who state that, in every case of obsession, the law of cause and effect works implacably, and therefore there should not be any intervention on behalf of tormented mediumship. A mere argument of well-fed selfishness. That would be the same as forsaking the sick under the pretext that they are debtors before the law. We all have to struggle to pay off our past debts, knowing that there is no unjustified suffering. And if we know that only pure love and constant service can ensure our redemption with regard to one another, then how can we disdain, in the name of the principles to which we ourselves are subjected, those who suffer? Today, it is the neighbor who suffers the consequences of certain actions in the past. Tomorrow, it will be we ourselves who reap the results of gestures that dishonored our past and now afflict us in the present. If cooperation is lacking among victims on the thorn-covered road, surely the task of salvation will be much longer and difficult for each of us. Likewise, there is no lack of those who believe that we shouldn't concern ourselves with problems related to complex mediumship, because, They say each person has to find the truth for him or herself. They believe that religion is nothing but a crutch and that no one should seek out instructors on matters of their own competence. Alice made a good-humored gesture and replied, "That would be like eliminating the school and reveling the love that is inherent in all creation. Any dignified religion, whatever the holy place where it is expressed, is a sanctuary for the education of the soul during its gradual evolution towards immortality. Let's imagine a large country where millions of children have been relegated to moral and cultural abandonment by their parents and teachers under the allegation that it is the children's duty to seek virtue and wisdom by themselves. Let's imagine a large field teeming with sick people to whom eminent doctors would recommend they seek health by themselves, leaving them to their own devices. Would there be logic in such measures? Interdependence lies at the base of all phenomena of life. The strong are the tutors of the weak. The learned are responsible for the unlearned. Children can't go without the help of their parents." The assistant paused briefly and proceeded. "We have to remember that not everyone is of the same spiritual age, and that earthly humanity as a whole is still as far from angelhood as aggressive animality is from full human reasoning. It is way too soon for human beings to claim the right to plead for the absolute truth. For now, it is essential that they work intensely, with ardent and profound devotion to the good in order to attain a broader understanding of the fragmentary or provisory realities of physical life. Looking at the matter from that point of view, we may be certain that the lack of schools for the spirit or the suppression of instructors would cause an increase in the number of asylums and the relaxation of morals, because without the call to the dignifying of the individual through a process of mental growth and sublimation over time, we could count only on stagnation at the lower levels of life." We were nearing the end of our trip. The sanctuary home where our assistant resided was now in sight. "Let us work cheerfully," Alice said. "Time plus service to the good is the foundation for our victory." Alice was to leave for a lofty mission far away the following day. Thus, he promised us a farewell embrace the next morning.